I didn't expect the game to matter. It was one of those nights where boredom hit hard, and someone jokingly suggested a round of Truth or Dare like we were 15 again. We were 6 college guys, holed up in a cabin near Lake Geneva, 3 hours from campus, surrounded by woods, cheap beer, and absolutely zero cell service. The plan was simple. A guy's weekend before senior year started. Just us, the lake, and no responsibilities. I almost didn't go. I'd just gotten out of a weird situationship with a guy who ghosted me 2 weeks before we were supposed to move in together. But Mason, my best friend, had practically begged me to come. "You need this," he said. "I swear you'll forget all about Dylan by the end of the weekend." I didn't believe him, but I went anyway. The first night was chill. Bonfire, beers, lazy trash talking. Then came the second night, when someone, probably Eli, cracked open a bottle of whiskey, and someone else, definitely Jamie, pulled out a speaker and started blasting early 2000s pop punk. That's when the game started. We were crammed into the living room, the lights low, the only illumination coming from the fireplace and the soft blue glow of someone's Bluetooth speaker. Empty bottles littered the floor, and the air was thick with smoke and that sweet, musky cologne college guys wear when they want to smell casual. It was Mason's idea to play. He sat next to me on the floor, cross-legged, wearing athletic shorts and a hoodie, sipping from a red Solo cup. We'd been friends since freshman year, when we were randomly paired as roommates. He was everything I wasn't: loud, athletic, charming, and people loved him for it. He had this magnetism that made you feel like you were always part of the joke, even if you weren't. I'd crushed on him for most of sophomore year. Quietly. Pathetically. But it faded. Mostly. Or at least, I thought it had. "Let's make it interesting," Mason said, his voice loud over the music. "No backing out. If you refuse a dare, you drink. If you lie during a truth, and we call you out, you drink twice." Everyone agreed. Laughing and hooting like this was some wild fraternity hazing. I just smiled and nodded, my stomach twisting a little. I wasn't drunk, not really, but I wasn't sober either. The game started harmless. Stupid dares. Eli had to do 10 push-ups with Jamie on his back. Colin had to text his ex something cringy. Mason took a shot off someone's belly. I was dared to eat a handful of jalapeno chips soaked in hot sauce, which nearly killed me. And then it got weird. It always does. Someone asked Jamie if he'd ever kissed a guy. He laughed and said, "Only when I lost a bet." Eli was dared to show everyone his search history. Big mistake. And then it was Mason's turn. He looked at me. "Truth or dare, Leo?" My throat went dry. "Truth," he grinned. "Have you ever wanted to kiss someone in this room?" Everyone laughed and leaned forward like this was some juicy drama. I rolled my eyes, trying to act cool. "Maybe," I said, playing coy. "Who?" Jamie pushed. I shook my head. "That's not the question." "He didn't say no," Eli pointed out. Mason smirked, eyes still on me. Okay, your turn, man." I turned to him, heart thudding. "Truth or dare?" He didn't hesitate. "Dare." I should have picked something dumb, shotgun a beer, do 20 jumping jacks shirtless. Something safe. But instead, I said, "I dare you to kiss someone in this room." The whole group exploded with shouts and laughter. Someone yelled, "Let's go!" And someone else said, "Make it a good one, bro." Mason just smiled. Without breaking eye contact, he leaned over and kissed me. It wasn't a joke kiss either. Not some quick, goofy peck to get a laugh. It was slow, intentional. His hand came up to cup the back of my neck, and for a second, just one hot, electrified second, everything stopped. When he pulled away, the room had gone quiet. I stared at him, stunned. He shrugged, still smiling. Dare's a dare. But there was something in his eyes, something that said this wasn't just for the game. I didn't know what to say. I sat there, heart pounding, pretending everything was normal, while the rest of the guys whooped and clapped and moved on like nothing had happened. But everything had changed, and it was only the beginning. I tried to play it cool, really I did. The guys moved on like the kiss never happened. Jamie dared Eli to run outside in his boxers and scream, "Aliens are real!" And Colin spilled beer on himself trying to laugh and chug at the same time. The energy shifted back to chaos, but I stayed quiet, staring into the fire like it held answers. But my mind? Still stuck on Mason's lips. Not because it was my first time kissing him. I'd dreamed about that too many nights to count, but because of how he kissed me. That slow press, the way his hand didn't let go right away. That wasn't a prank kiss. That was different. I glanced at him. He looked relaxed, like always. But I'd lived with Mason long enough to know when he was faking chill. His leg was bouncing, and his beer can was half full but clenched in his hand like he didn't realize it. He felt it too. At some point, the game fizzled out. Someone put on a movie, someone else passed out half on the couch. It was the kind of scene you'd expect after too much booze and not enough food. Eventually, people trickled off to bedrooms and spare mattresses, leaving just me and Mason still sitting near the fire. We didn't speak. Not at first. The fire had dimmed to glowing embers. Mason leaned back on his palms, looking up at the wooden ceiling like it held some cosmic secret. I was about to get up and call it a night when he finally spoke. "You all right?" I nodded, then hesitated. "Yeah. Are you?" He looked at me. "You didn't seem like you hated that." I froze. He said it lightly, like a joke, but his eyes didn't flinch. I wanted to match that energy, crack a sarcastic line, deflect. But I was tired of pretending. My walls were thin after that kiss. "I didn't," I said. "Not even a little." Mason didn't say anything for a second. Then he nodded slowly, like he'd been waiting to hear that. "Good," he said. I looked at him, trying to read him through the flicker of the dying fire. "What about you?" I asked. "Was that just for the game?" He exhaled through his nose. "I thought it was. Before I did it." I turned toward him fully, heart thudding. "And after?" He looked at me again, and this time the easy grin was gone. His voice dropped low. "After, I wanted to do it again." My throat went dry. I didn't move, didn't speak. Because I knew, if I did, something would change. The air between us felt thick, electric. That line we'd been walking for years, roommates, best friends, just friends, was about to snap. Mason leaned in slightly, and I could see it then, the nervousness. The uncertainty behind the confidence. "This doesn't have to mean anything," he said, barely above a whisper, "but I think I want it to." That was it. That was all I needed. I kissed him first this time. No audience. No laughter. No dares. Just me and Mason, alone in a half-lit cabin, with the sound of the fire crackling and his lips moving against mine like he'd been waiting for this as long as I had. He pulled me closer, one hand gripping the side of my hoodie, the other finding the back of my neck. It was messy, tentative at first, like we were both figuring it out in real time. But it didn't stay tentative. Not for long. He deepened the kiss, his fingers tightening just slightly as I moved into his lap without thinking, my legs on either side of his. He didn't stop me. He just held me there, breath shaky, eyes wide, like he couldn't believe this was happening either. "I should have done that months ago," he whispered, resting his forehead against mine. I couldn't help but laugh, breathless. "Yeah, you're late, man." He smiled, really smiled. "You gonna let me make it up to you?" I nodded, because, yeah, I was definitely going to let him. We didn't make it to our rooms that night. After the second kiss, we stayed on the floor by the fireplace, tangled in each other like we were scared the moment would disappear if we moved. His hand slid under my hoodie at one point, not even trying to be slick about it, just tracing my back with slow, careful fingers like he was memorizing the shape of me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't horny cabin moment energy either. It was deliberate, intimate, the kind of touch that said, I've thought about this. Eventually, we crashed on the same pull-out couch, me curled against him, my face buried in the space between his neck and shoulder. His hoodie was soft, worn thin at the edges, and I could smell his deodorant and wood smoke and just Mason. When I woke up, the fire was out. So were the lights. But Mason's arm was still around me. And that's what really got me. He could have shifted away in his sleep, could have rolled over or shrugged off what happened. But no, he was still holding me. His body warm and relaxed against mine, chest rising and falling slow, like this was just normal now. I lay there for a long time, listening to the soft sounds of the house. Snoring from the next room, the occasional creak of the old floorboards, someone flushing a toilet upstairs. But all I could think about was what came next. This wasn't just a kiss anymore. It was real. It meant something. And that terrified me a little, because Mason, he wasn't out. Not really. I mean, he'd made offhand comments in the past, jokes about guys being hot. Once said Harry Styles could get it, but we all laughed it off. I didn't know if he was bi, if he'd been hiding something, or if last night was his first time even thinking about another guy like that. And now, he'd kissed me, held me, fallen asleep with me, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I was halfway into a spiral when he stirred beside me, his eyes opened slowly, blinking against the dim morning light. He looked at me, squinted a little, and then gave me a lazy, half-asleep smile. Hey, I couldn't help but smile back. Hey, you drooled on my arm. Shut up, he laughed, rubbing his face with one hand, the other still draped across my waist. Then he sighed and let his head fall back against the pillow. Wasn't dreaming, huh? He asked. Nope. A beat passed. He looked at me again. You okay? I nodded, then hesitated. Are you? His face shifted a little, serious for a moment. Yeah, he said. I mean, yeah. It's a lot, but I don't regret it, I exhaled, some invisible pressure in my chest loosening. But, he added, I don't really know what happens next. Me neither. We lay there in silence for a bit, the kind of silence that didn't feel awkward, just full of unspoken stuff. Then he rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling. Can I ask you something? Yeah. Did you ever think about it? Me, I mean. Before last night, I snorted. Dude, I lived with you for 2 years. I've absolutely thought about it. He turned to look at me, eyebrows raised. Seriously? Mason, you walk around shirtless like it's your job. You once told me I looked, soft in a good way, when I came back from the gym. And you spooned me when you were drunk sophomore year. That was 1 time. That was 4 times. He laughed, covering his face with both hands. Okay, fair. Guess I was testing the waters. You were splashing around like a golden retriever. We both cracked up, and for the first time that morning, it felt like everything might actually be okay. That was until the front door opened, and Jamie walked in holding a bag of donuts. He stopped dead in the entryway. Saw us. Saw the blanket. The shared couch. The arms still halfway around my waist. Oh, he said, blinking. Well, shit. Jamie just stood there. Me and Mason, still half under the blanket, still wrapped up in the kind of position that didn't leave much to the imagination. We didn't move. Not right away. Because there's a moment when you're caught, where your brain freezes and your body forgets how to do literally anything. Even breathe. Morning, Jamie finally said, raising the bag in his hand like this was a casual breakfast drop-off and not a full-on exposure moment. I brought crullers. Mason coughed. Thanks. Jamie stepped into the kitchen, like walking in on 2 of your friends spooning on the couch wasn't something that needed unpacking. He opened the bag, pulled out a donut, and took a bite before speaking again. So, is this a thing now? I glanced at Mason. His jaw tightened for a second, like he was trying to decide what kind of story to spin. But then he surprised me. Yeah, he said simply. I think it is. My heart did a weird flutter. It shouldn't have. Not with Jamie standing 10 feet away holding a half-eaten cruller, but still, hearing Mason say that, out loud, that wasn't nothing. Jamie looked between us. Cool, he said finally, nodding. Just didn't want to make out with either of you later by accident. Appreciate the heads up. I barked a laugh. Mason just groaned and threw a pillow at him. All right, Jamie said, retreating. I'll give you 2 your morning after cuddles or whatever. But if you guys are going to start dating, I swear to God, don't be that couple that moans during Mario Kart. No promises. Mason shot back. When the door closed behind him, Mason let out a long breath. Well, that was smoother than I expected. I rolled over to face him. You really just told Jamie? I figured it was better than pretending we just fell asleep holding each other for warmth. Technically, that is what happened. Mason looked at me for a long moment. Leo, I don't want to pretend. His voice was soft, almost hesitant, but the weight behind the words was real. I nodded, something tight building behind my ribs. I don't either. We didn't talk much more that morning. Just got up, brushed our teeth, joined the rest of the guys in the kitchen like we hadn't just hit some emotional milestone in the middle of a beer-fueled guys trip. But everything felt different. Like how Mason stood just a little closer than necessary when we were all gathered around the island. Or how he passed me the butter with a barely there smile and his fingers brushing mine on purpose. I caught Jamie watching us at one point. He didn't say anything. Just gave me a subtle nod like, yeah, I see it. Good for you. It should have been the most awkward breakfast of my life. It wasn't. After we cleared plates and people started filtering out to the lake, Mason tugged my hoodie, pulling me aside toward the back deck. The sun was just high enough to warm the wood planks beneath our feet, and the breeze off the water made it feel like early fall instead of late summer. He leaned against the railing. So, I raised an eyebrow. So, what happens when we go back? I knew what he meant. At school, everything was different. People knew us. People assumed things. We'd both spent 3 years playing the straight boy best friends role. Nobody was going to expect this. I don't know, I said honestly. Do you want people to know? Mason was quiet for a second, then said, I want you to know. My stomach flipped. Then that's enough for now. He reached for my hand, not some dramatic gesture, just fingers sliding over mine, skin warm and familiar. He didn't let go. Want to go swimming? He asked. Only if I get the floaty shaped like a pizza slice. Mason grinned. You can have the crust. I want the pepperoni end. We headed toward the dock. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what people would say, or how weird things might get, or if I'd regret this later. I was just thinking about the way his hand felt in mine, and how maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something real. The lake was cold. Not freezing, but that kind of shocking cold that hits your skin and makes you laugh through your teeth while your body tries to adjust. Mason pushed me off the floaty within 10 seconds of us getting out there, which felt very on brand. I dragged him in with me 2 seconds later, which felt even better. We splashed around like kids. No weird tension, no big talks, just us, stupid, laughing, soaked in sunlight. At one point he dunked me and I came up gasping, hair plastered to my forehead. He was grinning at me, water dripping off his chin, and I felt it again. That rush, that knowing. This wasn't some vacation fling. This was Mason, and somehow it was real now. The rest of the day passed in this strange, suspended bubble. Everyone went back to normal, more or less. The other guys didn't press. Jamie gave me a few knowing glances, but he kept it cool. Eli and Colin were more focused on finishing the last of the beer and seeing who could grill the worst burger. It was like the group silently agreed. Whatever's happening between those two, let them figure it out. That night, Mason and I ended up back on the couch. Not because we had to. There were open beds, but we just gravitated back there. He handed me a hoodie, his, and I pulled it on without thinking. We sat close, knees touching, the air between us comfortable in a way I hadn't felt in years. Then he whispered, Can I ask you something real? I turned. Always. Why didn't you ever tell me? My breath caught. I don't know. I said, because you were straight, because I didn't want to lose you, because every time I thought about saying something, I imagined you looking at me different, and I couldn't handle that. Mason didn't flinch. I think I always looked at you different. What does that mean? He hesitated, then said, it means I noticed stuff, like how you bit your lip when you were nervous, or how you always pulled your sleeves over your hands when you were tired. It means that when you weren't around, shit didn't feel right. I blinked. I told myself it was just friendship, he went on, that I was just being a good roommate, a good guy. But then last night, the kiss, I don't know, it just clicked. I nodded slowly, swallowing hard. And now? I asked. He looked at me, something raw and open in his expression. Now I don't want this to be a one-time thing. Me neither. We sat like that for a while, letting it sink in. Eventually, Mason stood and held out his hand. Come on. Where? My room. We don't have to do anything. I just want you there. I took his hand. And that night, we lay together again. Only this time, it wasn't confusing or scary. It was quiet. Safe. His back against my chest, our legs tangled under the blanket, and the soft rhythm of his breathing guiding me into sleep. And for the first time in months, maybe longer, I felt calm. The next morning, sunlight slanted through the blinds, cutting across Mason's bare shoulder and warming the side of my face. I blinked awake to the smell of coffee, or maybe it was just the cabin, pine and wood smoke. But Mason was already up, moving around quietly, pulling on sweatpants and a t-shirt that looked far too snug in all the right places. He caught me staring. Morning, he said softly, not teasing, just present. Morning, I mumbled, voice rough. My chest still thumped from being so close to him all night. The quiet intimacy of it lingered, and I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. He came back with 2 mugs, handed me one. His fingers brushed mine, and I felt that same spark that had been there since last night. That mix of calm and chaos, of familiarity and something dangerously new. So, he said, leaning against the door frame. What happens today? I shrugged. Whatever you want. Good answer. He grinned, then hesitated. I mean, do you want to tell anyone about us? I shook my head. Not yet. Let's see how it goes. We don't have to define everything right now. He nodded. Relief flickered across his face. Yeah, okay. We spent the morning like that. Quiet, easy, a little breakfast, a little banter. But nothing forced, nothing rushed. Every small brush of hands, every shared smile, carried more weight than anything else that had happened the weekend. Every glance felt loaded, but in a way that didn't scare me, in a way that made me feel right. Later, we decided to go down to the lake again. Mason ran ahead, splashing around like an idiot, and I laughed, following him in. There was no pretense, no tension, just 2 guys who had crossed a line but hadn't freaked out, who had found a way to make it natural. At one point, Mason grabbed my wrist and pulled me under the water. I surfaced coughing, spluttering, laughing, and he pressed close, forehead to forehead, letting the current swirl around us. It was ridiculous, childish even, but in that moment it felt serious, grounded, like this was exactly where we were supposed to be. When we got out, dripping wet, he leaned against me, nudging my side. Truth or dare? He asked, grinning. I rolled my eyes. You're terrible. Dare, I thought for a second. My stomach flipped. I dare you to admit you've been thinking about this, about me, longer than you'd like to admit. He froze, blinking. Then he laughed. A little nervous, a little guilty. Yeah, he said finally. I have. Since when? I asked, heart hammering. Since sophomore year, he whispered. I just didn't know how to say it. You're my best friend, Leo. I didn't want to mess that up. I smiled, breathless. You didn't. He exhaled, and in that moment, I could see it. The honesty, the vulnerability. It made everything we'd done last night, everything that had happened over the weekend, feel like it wasn't a fluke, like it was supposed to happen. Like this was the start of something real. Then he kissed me. Slow, deliberate. Like last night, but with the weight of confession in it. My hands went to his waist, holding him close as the lake water ran down our bodies. Nobody was watching. Nobody could interrupt. Just the sun, the lake, and Mason. And it was perfect. The rest of the weekend passed in this new rhythm. Every moment with Mason felt heightened. The way he laughed at something small, the way he'd brush past me in the kitchen with a subtle touch of his hand on my back, the way he'd catch my eye and hold it for a beat too long, everything suddenly meant something. By the time Sunday rolled around, reality was creeping back in. Classes, responsibilities, the people who didn't know about us. I could feel the tension building, both of us knowing the world outside this cabin wouldn't understand what we were doing here. We were sitting on the dock, legs dangling over the water, a gentle breeze rippling the lake's surface. Mason tossed a pebble into the water, watching the ripples spread. "Hey," I said softly, not sure if I wanted an answer. "Do you regret any of this?" He didn't respond right away, just watched the water for a long time. Then he looked at me, eyes clear, open, a little mischievous. "No," he said finally. "Not for a second. You?" "Nope," I admitted, smiling. "Not even a little." His grin widened, and he leaned over to press a quick kiss to my lips. "Good," he murmured, "because I don't think I can go back to being just friends after this." I shivered a little, not from the breeze, but from knowing he was right. Everything had changed. Our dynamic, our closeness, the way I thought about him every second of the day. It couldn't go back to normal. Later, as we packed up to leave, Mason pulled me aside. "We need to be careful," he said quietly. "People can't know yet." I nodded, heart sinking a little. "I know, but Mason, this is us now. Right?" He smiled, and I could see both relief and mischief flickering in his gaze. "Right. Us." And as we drove away from the cabin, leaving the lake shimmering behind us in the late afternoon sun, I realized something. It wasn't just a dare. It wasn't just a weekend fling. It was the beginning of whatever this was between us. Dangerous, thrilling, terrifying, and entirely, completely real. Back at campus, everything felt different. The dorm halls were the same, the cafeteria lines long, the usual chatter of students filling the air, but Mason and I moved through it like we had a secret, a shared gravity that nobody else could see. Classes were awkward at first. We exchanged subtle glances across lecture halls, fingers brushing accidentally, or maybe not, as we passed in crowded hallways. I caught him watching me more than once, and each time, my chest tightened in a way that made paying attention nearly impossible. We couldn't be obvious. Not yet, but that didn't stop the little moments. Lunch together at the usual spot, walking back from class side by side, his hand brushing mine until we didn't move away. One night, a week after we returned, we were back in our dorm room, sitting on opposite beds, textbooks open but forgotten. So I said, trying to act casual while my stomach did somersaults, "How's it feel going public with our little secret?" Mason smirked, lying back on his bed with hands behind his head. "Honestly? Terrifying. But also, right. Feels like I've been waiting forever to not have to hide." I laughed softly. "Yeah, me too." There was a pause, that electric, quiet tension that had become our language. Then he shifted, sitting up and moving closer. His knee bumped mine, and I didn't move away. "You know," he whispered, "truth or dare might be my favorite game now." I raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? He leaned in, grin turning mischievous. Yeah. Because I finally know I can do whatever I want, and you'll probably like it. I laughed, shaking my head. You're lucky I like you. Lucky? He teased. Nah, this is destiny. And in that moment, I believed him. Mason leaned closer, brushing his forehead against mine. The world outside our dorm room disappeared. Professors, students, exams, gossip, all irrelevant. There was just him. Just us. I pressed my lips to his again, slower this time. Deliberate, savoring it. He kissed me back, deepening it. Like every little frustration and secret longing of the past year was being poured into that one kiss. When we pulled back, breathless, he whispered, "We survived Truth or Dare. Now we survive everything else, together." I smiled, heart full, knowing it was true, because that night, and every night after, it wasn't a game anymore. It was real. It was us. And somehow, against the odds, that was more thrilling than any dare I'd ever accepted.